Good morning, everyone. It's your host, Kate Francis, and today I'm going to be hosting It Is What It Is, or Is It? As always, my listeners are rather scattered in various cities and states and even a couple of few countries. So wherever you are, I'm happy you could join me today, and we'll just really get into some things that I think you're going to enjoy. Recently, I received a request to discuss to discuss the issue of anger. Initially, I was inclined to decline this request because last year I wrote a podcast, an in-depth one called The Agonies of Anger. And I was hesitant to do another one on anger. But after a lot of thought about it, prayed on it, I decided I'm going to honor this request. So, my approach to this topic, what does anger do for you and me and all of us? I'm going to do something a little differently. There'll be some questions asked. Think of it like a small personal exercise for yourself. The questions you will be asked after each quote that I give you, you need to be thoughtful about and honest in how you answer yourself. Remember, nobody else is hearing your answers. If you can answer these questions in that way, it will provide you with greater insight into yourself and a path to tremendous self satisfaction and inner peace. Anger keeps you from having that. And I'm sure you know you can't, they don't go together at all. So I will be quoting from different people, some of whom you may or may not know. And this will allow you, now listen to the big word, to identify, or try to at least identify, if and how each quote may or may not relate to you. The exercise, again, is thought provoking, but it really requires a sincere desire to become more objective about yourself and how you live your life. If you don't care to look inward, that's okay. You can still find the quotes interesting at least. But before we go on with our topic itself, let the therapist and me share what I have seen and heard from angry patients over my years of practice. I can tell you that I have never, with a patient who was angry, resentful, or jealous and worked out of those emotions more than any others, who could experience any satisfactory level of joy and genuine self satisfaction. Worse yet, many justified their anger rather than accept that the problem was internal, not external. So if they justified their negative attitude and anger rather than to accept that it's a part of who they have become, they were going to probably lead a pretty sad life. And that's unfortunate for them. You know, you can't have anger and happiness at the same time. They're opposed to one another. So it's learning how to realize that and ask yourself, what is anger doing for me? What is it doing for you? So let's get started with the exercise itself. I'm going to start with a quote from Yoda, and it was The Phantom Menace in 1999. And it goes like this: Fear is the path to the dark side. Fear leads to anger, anger leads to hate, and hate leads to suffering. Have you ever been on the dark side and you found that you were quick to anger and you angered frequently? These are the questions I want you to ask yourself. Why am I angry? What's happening to me right now? Why am I angry? Who is my anger targeted at? And what were my reactions and behavior during this angry mood and period, and the lashing out. Stop and really question yourself. And to me, I think you're going to find your answers can be very interesting if you've got the courage to really look at it. Because anger is, in fact, a normal emotion, just like sadness or grief or whatever. We have a lot of emotions and they're all legitimate. But anger is normal when it is and has a legitimate reason. And the real part of the story is how you handle your anger, how you control your anger. Your attitude and ability to control your anger dictate how effective you're going to be as a person and how others in your life are going to perceive you. And that's pretty important, especially if you want to have good relationships and you want to be respected and you want to have good friendships. These are all very important things to have in your life. That, your coworkers like you and you're able to enjoy them. Or do you isolate yourself and are you cut off from friends? You have to ask yourself if that's the case, why? Maybe you're coming from that angry place. And we know that underneath that is fear, but you haven't identified that fear yet. It could be more than one. Never forget that anger and resentment are interconnected. So if you're feeling one, somewhere along the line, that other one's going to work itself right in there. Okay? And as long as you are interconnected like that, and that's the deeper feeling that's being taken over by anger, neither one of them are going to ever let you really experience any kind of real contentment, true happiness. Your attitude and ability to control your anger dictate how effective you are personally and how others are going to perceive you, and also how you perceive yourself. Never forget that anger and resentment are interconnected. So neither will ever bring you contentment or true happiness or a sense of overall well-being. Think about the words resentment, anger. These are not happy words. Oh, I'm not telling you you won't have spurts of some happiness and feel pleased with yourself on occasion, but this is only going to be able to last until the next incident or the next disappointment comes along your way and you are back to your self-deprecating ways. You're right there on that dark side again. So we're really saying at this point that there's nothing resolved. It's just, remember the hamsters on the wheel, how they go round and round and round, and you just never knew when the little guy was going to jump off. Well, that's kind of like what anger can do when you don't really address it. It just kind of is there, and it's just waiting. One of the quotes, it's a biblical quote actually, and it's from the word wisdom of Solomon. And for any of you that want to look it up, it's in Ecclesiastes chapter 7, verse 9. What does it say? Anger resides in the heart of fools. Wow. No better words were ever spoken. You heard what Yoda had to say, and you're going to hear some more quotes, and no one has decided yet that it's very wise. So you have to ask yourself these questions. How much wisdom do I think I have if I believe anger will produce positive outcomes? Let me just give you my quick answer to you. Not many good outcomes, not at all, especially when you're masking all of the pain or in your insecurities, self-doubts, even shame, self-shame, that are there internally, and you're feeling them. And therefore, what is your defense mechanism? Anger. It's easier for you to feel anger than it is to feel sadness. Anger is a misuse of your energy, your emotional energy, your mental energy, your physical energy, as well as it is a misuse of your creativity abilities. It's hard to be creative and be miserable at the same time. Temporarily, you may have moments or days, or maybe even some months that go pretty well. And you do experience less unhappiness, and that's good. However, if something doesn't go the way you want it to go, or it doesn't go well, what do you think is going to come up? How do you think you're going to deal with it? And you've never resolved the root of the cause of your anger. But there it is in color, so to speak. There's a quote by Mark Twain, and he says, anger is an acid that can do more harm to the vessel that it's stored in than to anything on which it's poured. If you stop and dwell on those words, it's a powerful quote. You're going to listen to that quote. It's one of the more important life lessons. You're only hurting yourself by festering and living in your insecurities and your shame or unhappiness or whatever emotion it is that you're into that really needs your attention. But your defense goes to anger immediately. That's your cover up, when actually you may be feeling very deep sadness. I'm going to ask you, why would you want to keep yourself in that kind of condition? Why would you want to go there to begin with? Like I said, there's legitimate anger, and I'm not telling you that that's not something that people don't feel, and it's normal to feel when it's appropriate and how it's handled. But to have yourself in the condition like that, it doesn't make sense, except that you don't have the courage, or you're denying what you need to do, how you can help yourself. Here's a quick short quote from Jane Austen. Angry people are not always wise. So we're going back to Solomon talking about wisdom. We're going back to, Jane Austen and the wisdom of it all, the wise thinking. Sometimes we think we're so wise and we really outsmarted ourselves because our wisdom hasn't been well thought out. A quote from Ambrose Bryce is simple, but it's a great quote, and it kind of really backs up that point about how anger is used and why it's not wise. He says, and I quote, "Speak when you are angry, and you will have made the best speech you will ever forget." And how true is that? Words are powerful. We don't stop and think what comes out of our mouth. They say count to 100, count to whatever. Yeah, that's a tool. And if it helps, do it. But we really need to get to the root of the problem so we can get rid of the problem, so that we start to see ourselves in a different light. It doesn't hurt to have faith, and to turn to your faith, whatever that might be. Silence, I think, is a beautiful tool. It's a wonderful tool, because when you feel anger rising up within you, just be quiet. Refrain from saying anything. You won't regret it. From Psalm 37, that's chapter 37, verse 8. Don't give in to worry or anger. It only leads to trouble. And for any of you that operate out of fear, and I've talked about the difference between operating out of fear and love, it's always trouble when you're out of, because we need to have an awareness of our fears and deal with them. We need to realize that we're capable of much more, we're worth much more, and we've been given gifts. We've been given the opportunity to change. We've been given free will. So what are we using it for? Are we using it on the dark side? Or are we looking for the light that it'll give us, the lightness of our spirit, the lightness of how we go about our life, rather than to be burdened and to remain stuck. Now, finally, I want to share with you one of my favorite quotes from Maya. You know who I'm going to say, Maya Angelou, or I think she pronounces it Maya maybe, but I think it's Maya Angelou or Maya, however you pronounce it. And here's what she has to say. And she's lived a lot of life, and not all of it was easy by any means. But she was wise, and she followed wisdom. And she said, I've learned that people forget what you've said, and people will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel. Think about that. So I want to share a concept that was developed by the Gottman Institute, and it's called, and I love the name of this, Uncovering the Anger Iceberg, What Lies Beneath. Uncovering the anger iceberg refers to the psychological concept that when someone expresses anger, it's often just the visible tip of a deeper emotional issue. Like an iceberg, where most of the mass is hidden beneath the water's surface, this is what we do in our life. We mask our emotions. And this means that the underlying emotions, such as fear, or hurt, or frustration, sadness, are masked often, too often, by anger. Exploring these deeper feelings is key to managing anger effectively. So we're not telling you that you won't have an emotion of anger, not at all. But we're telling you that you need to think about how you are using it. So in closing today, I want to say that anger makes you smaller, while forgiveness forces you to grow beyond what you were. And that's a neat concept. Think about it. We can be so much more if we'll just give ourselves a chance. Yeah, we could have had really horrific backgrounds. Probably could have had a physical or emotional or mental trauma. All of this is can lead to fear and anger and sadness and all the emotions we're talking about. But it's what do you do with it? What do you do about it? Think of therapy this way. When you want to core an apple, you just go in and you take the core out, right? Well, with therapy, think of it as an onion. It's peel after peel after peel after peel. Because as you peel one layer and say, aha, that makes sense, pretty soon it's the next layer. Yeah, does it take some courage? Does it take time? You bet. It's not done in 3 easy sessions, but it's well worth the outcome. Well worth the outcome. And I'd be really reckless if I didn't point out that if there was ever a time in our lifetime and world that we needed to diminish anger, that we needed to stop the anger and the division and the hate and the lack of compassion, the lack of morals and hope and faith and family values, it is now. It's present. It's all around us. Oh, throughout all the years, there's been a lot of that. We know that. And a lot of people say, well, what's different? What's different is we're living in it. Just remember that there is power. You have power. There is power in having faith and hope and charity and showing love for one another. You know how they say there's power in numbers? That's so true. Because if you're showing those things, you're lifting something up, yourself and others. Okay? So thanks to all my listeners for listening today. And I want you to remember that each and every one of you out there is capable of giving and receiving and handling your emotions in your best interest. And I hope you will learn something from today. And again, I do recommend that you go back and listen to my podcast on the agonies of anger. because it's a more in-depth, and there'll be more, I think, maybe more connection for you, and maybe some more help. So please do, if you have time. It's 20 minutes. And remember, keep the faith, never give up of hope, and know when to let go. Thank you, and God bless.